Lagos, the nation's commercial capital. This is the News at 10. Live from the Channels Television. Reporting tonight, Kayode Okekiolu.
Tonight, no nation, no elections. Former President Jonathan warns on new threats to democracy as other speakers at a one-day conference in Abuja urge politicians to pursue peaceful and violence-free polls in 2023. Lawmakers in the upper legislative chambers urge governors to invest more in security following the attack on Senator Ifeanyi Ubah as southern governors hailed demand for state police by their northern colleagues. Police in Abia State arrest 10 of 14 suspects believed to be involved in several attacks on bullion vans in different parts of the country.
And on business news tonight, House of Representatives proposes bill to repeal the Investment and Securities Act 2007.
On sports news tonight, World Athletics ratifies Tobi Amusan's 12.12 seconds world record set in the women's 100-meter hurdle set at the World Athletics Championships in Oregon.
And from the nation's capital, the International Labour Organization asks the federal government to address poverty, illiteracy and other key drivers of child labor in the country.
And in international news from London, Union Jack flags have been flying at full mast once again as the period of national mourning for Queen Elizabeth II comes to an end.
If there is no country, there will be no elections. These are the words of former President Goodluck Jonathan, who believes that those contesting in the 2023 general elections have the biggest stake in protecting Nigeria from destruction. He stated this at the 2022 Peace Conference organized by the Goodluck Jonathan Foundation in Abuja, where he also raised concern over the threats posed by hate speech and propaganda to Nigeria's democracy. Also at the event, the former head of state Abdulsalami Abubakar and other speakers called on politicians to desist from amplifying divisive tendencies ahead of elections next year. Our correspondent Emperor Simon reports.
Nigeria's 2023 general elections takes the center stage at this peace conference organized by the Goodluck Jonathan Foundation in Abuja. In attendance are the former President Goodluck Jonathan and his wife Dame Patience Jonathan, the Secretary to the Government of the Federation, Mr. Boss Mustafa, Governor Bala Mohammed of Bauchi State, former President of the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, Mr. Mohammed Ibn Chambers, founder of the Kuka Center, Bishop Matthew Kuka, politicians and diplomats who have converged to interrogate the role of elections in a multi-ethnic context like Nigeria. In a recorded message to the gathering, General Abdulsalami Abubakar, who is the chairman of the National Peace Committee, emphasizes the need for patriotism. As the secretary to the government of the Federation, Mr. Boss Mustafa advocates the re-engineering of political parties.
I'm calling all politicians, political parties, security agencies, election management body, and all stakeholders to ensure that Nigeria is placed first above regional and sectional claims. Nigeria is the only country we have. We must work together to secure it.
We will need to address the formation of our parties, the institutionalization of our parties, the strengthening of democratic ethos in our party. Because these are the platforms that produce the people that will occupy the offices. So if they are faulty in their nature, obviously the conduct of the people that will occupy those offices will equally be faulty.
However, the neutrality of institutions involved in the conduct of elections is key, as explained by the former president of the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, Mr. Mohamed Ibn Chambers.
It is important that the electoral management body, the judiciary, police, and other executive arm institutions operate in a neutral and professional manner, and not only operate as such, but are seen to do so.
For former President Goodluck Jonathan, those contesting in the 2023 general elections have the biggest stake of ensuring that the country's peace is protected.
Both those who want to be presidents and governors or hold other offices and their supporters should first know that we need to have a nation before whoever you are supporting can emerge as a governor or a president. We must discourage this issue of hate speech, this propaganda that is going on. Because before this time, we were always afraid of the gun as a threat to democracy. But the biggest threat to democracy now that we have is the issue of propaganda, fake news, and hate speech. And anybody that's an advocate of this, a vanguard of this, then you are a threat to democracy just like the gun.
A lot has been discussed with regards to the 2023 general elections, but the key question participants here have raised is whether the 2023 general election will be a defining moment for Nigeria's progress and unity as a country, or a dividing moment. Emperor Simon, Channels Television News.
Staying with the elections, the ruling All Progressives Congress APC has no candidate for Yobe North Senatorial District as the Independent National Electoral Commission INEC releases the final list of candidates for the 2023 presidential and National Assembly elections. 18 political parties are fielding 18 presidential candidates, 1,101 candidates for senatorial positions, and 3,122 candidates for federal constituencies in the forthcoming 2023 general elections. A total of 1,101 candidates vying for senatorial positions have their names published, but the column for the APC senatorial candidates for Yobe North Senatorial District, which has been a subject of contest between the Senate President Ahmed Lawan and Mr. Bashir Machina, is left blank. Meanwhile, the commission complied with the recent court judgment ordering it to publish the name of the former governor of Akwa Ibom State, Godswill Akpabio, as the APC senatorial candidate for Akwa Ibom Northwest Senatorial District. The list also has the name of the presidential candidate of the African Democratic Congress ADC, Mr. Dumebi Kachiko, whom the party says it has suspended over alleged anti-party activities. And now to the National Assembly, where after a 6-week recess, the Senate resumed plenary today with a call to state governors to do more as chief security officers of their state to secure Nigerians. The Deputy President of the Senate, Senator Ovie Omagigi, led the call today by senators for governors to invest more in security following the gruesome attack on their colleague, Senator Ifeanyi Ubah, that led to the death of several of his aides. The senators made the request following a motion of urgent national importance moved by Senator Uche Ekonefe. Our correspondent, Delia Moyeni, reports.
The Senate resumes in a makeshift chamber after a 7-week recess as the plenary chamber continues to undergo renovations. The lawmakers immediately go into an executive session. After about 2 hours, the doors are open and the lawmakers open up on some of the issues bothering them.
The Senate notes with deep concern the attack on Senator Ifeanyi Ubah's convoy on Sunday, September 11, 2022, at Enugu in Njikoka local government area of Anambra State. Mr. President, the Senate further notes with sadness that the attack on Senator Ifeanyi Ubah led to the gruesome killing of one of our greatest sons, Chief Onyeka Nnole Onowu of Nri. 2 of Ifeanyi Ubah's long-serving personal aides and 2 mobile police personnel.
What is wrong for a state government like the state government of Anambra State after the killing of a colleague of ours, a member of the State House of Assembly, beheaded in that manner. What is wrong if that state, for instance, would have made some investment in acquisition of this security equipment and gadgets? With those acquisitions, Mr. President, it will not be difficult to track those who attempted the life of our colleague.
When killings are going on under your watch as the chief security officer of a state, and you are saying nothing, that tells of the incompetency that is inherent in some of these governors.
Earlier, the Senate President had read 5 letters from President Muhammadu Buhari asking for some approvals, and notable among them is a request for the Senate to approve the 2023-2025 Medium-Term Expenditure Framework and Fiscal Policy.
It is with pleasure that I forward the 2023-2025 Medium-Term Expenditure Framework and Fiscal Strategy paper, MTEF and FSP, for the kind consideration and approval of the Senate.
As the Senate today resumed plenary, 2 major issues came to the fore: the economy and security. For the economy, the Senate resolved to work with the federal government as the President has submitted the 2023-2025 MTEF. And for security, following the mind-boggling attack on one of their colleagues, Senator Ifeanyi Ubah, the Senate resolves that the police and the DSS investigate the matter and report to the Senate in the next 2 weeks. Dele Omoyeni, Channels Television News.
Well, it will seem the governors themselves have found a common front of one of the strategies being touted as a solution to the menace of insecurity. Following the resolution by the 19 Northern Governors and the Northern Traditional Rulers Council calling for the establishment of state police, the Southern Governors Forum has welcomed the decision of their Northern colleagues. The Southern Governors Forum, which has also been clamoring for state police, says it received the news with great relief, particularly when the confidence in the capacity of the federal government to secure the country appears shaky. In a statement by the chairman of the Southern Governors Forum and Ondo State Governor Oluwarotimi Akeredolu, the governors praised the courage of the Northern Governors and traditional rulers in taking such a stance at this crucial time in the country. The statement reads in part, "We, on our part, at the Southern Governors Forum, have continued to reiterate the fact of the incongruity inherent in an arrangement which purports to be federal nominally, but whose observations are at variance with the best practices espoused by climes considered advanced." It says the Southern Governors will continue to insist on the creation of state police as the only logical and pragmatic solution to the pervasive problem of insecurity in the country. Well, staying with security, the Taraba State Police Command says the explosion that occurred behind a drinking spot on the road to the Taraba State University was a detonated bomb. Briefing journalists in Jalingo, the state capital, the police public relations officer Abdullahi Usman explained that as a result, the command will reintroduce stop and search operation, as well as patrol and cordoning of suspicious areas to avert another explosion. This latest explosion is the 4th to occur in the state this year.
On that fateful day, we had a very ugly incident which took place at ATC roundabout around University Road, where there was a heavy blast. On receipt of the distress call, the Commissioner of Police, Taraba State Police Command, ordered the men of the bomb section to move there and ascertain exactly what was happening. On arrival, they cordoned the area and had a preliminary investigation to avoid secondary explosion, where it has been discovered that there was a blast. The content, the remnants of the blast, the particles inside shows that it was a detonated IED that was there. As a result of that, one of the wall was pulled down, and then we were lucky we could not experience any casualty and no any serious injury sustained by any person there. We are now going to reintroduce robust stop and search, both within the metro and then on the highways that lead to Ukari, Jalingo, Yola axis. We have already gotten that teams put in on the ground.
very soon they are going to swarm into action by making sure that we stem the tide. We could not allow such thing to happen again.
In part two, after the break, Federal High Court fixes October the 4th to hear a suit challenging INEC's decision to end the continuous voter registration exercise on July the 31st. That's in a moment. Welcome back. If you've just joined us, you're watching the news at 10, live on Channels Television Lagos. A reminder of our top stories. The former President Jonathan raises concern over new threats to democracy as other speakers at a one-day conference in Abuja urge politicians to pursue peaceful and violence-free elections in 2023. Lawmakers of the upper legislative chambers urge governors to invest more in security following the attack on Senator Ifeanyi Ubah, as southern governors hailed demand for state police by their northern colleagues. Police in Abia State arrest 10 of 14 suspects believed to be involved in several attacks on bullion vans in different parts of the country. And a period of national mourning for Queen Elizabeth II draws to a close, with flags on British government buildings around the world now flying at full mast. In Abia State, 10 out of the 14 suspected armed robbers said to have been behind attacks on bullion vans in various parts of the country have been arrested by the police. The robbery suspects were paraded at the command headquarters in Umuahia, the state capital, with exhibits such as general-purpose machine guns and 10 million naira, which was said to have been recovered from them. The Commissioner of Police in the state, Janet Agbede, explained that the arrested robbery suspects, including a dismissed DSS officer, had carried out their activities in Lagos, Ondo, Delta, Imo, and Abia states.
Suspects, in their individual voluntary statements, confessed belonging to a 14-man awful armed robbery gang with specialty in bullion van attacks, and that for about 2 months before the attack, the bullion van had been under their surveillance. They further confessed to have robbed bullion vans in Ajah, Lagos State, Akure Road, Ondo State, Asaba, Delta State, Mbize, Imo, and Enugu Port Harcourt Expressway, Abia State.
Well, for more stories on the news at 10, let's now head over to our Abuja studio where Terry Kumi is standing by. Well, good evening, Terry.
Hi, Kayode. Good evening. Now we move away from security now to another pressing matter. As efforts by various stakeholders continue to resolve the industrial disputes between the federal government and university lecturers, Speaker of the House of Representatives Femi Gbajabiamila says the House leadership will meet with the president when he returns to the country over the issue. He stated this after meeting behind closed doors with a federal government delegation led by the Minister of State for Education, as well as the leadership of ASU. According to the Speaker, some resolutions were reached at the meeting towards ending the strike.
There were principally 7 areas where ASU was presented what we consider to be what I call requisitions for us for them to go back to class. We have looked at those 7 areas and we have more or less agreed on certain things. In pursuance or to finalize what's the meeting of our minds, we have asked that NIGDA, the Accountant General and Auditor General, and the Wages and Salaries and Wages Commission will be invited. And once that is done, the leadership of this House will await the return of Mr. President from the ongoing General Assembly. And we will meet with Mr. President and lay before him the agreement made by this arm of government, the legislative, by the legislature and the leadership of the House. And we are hopeful and believe that Mr. President will buy into the agreement. And with that, I believe this matter will be speedily brought to a close.
Meanwhile, before going into the closed-door meeting, the ASUU president had informed the lawmakers that there has been no formal meeting with the Minister of Education on the strike. He also reacted to the suit filed by the government against the union and questioned the manner of teaching that could be expected from lecturers if they are compelled to return to the classrooms by the courts.
In Nigeria, in other universities, you're clear, other climb. When you people go on strike, you handle the strike. You don't look how to punish the people. You are aware. The first thing the Minister of Labour did was to go and say, stop their salaries. Instead of solving the problem, the Minister of Education said, we want to use it to teach them a lesson. Teach your academic a lesson. We're meeting. They told the Committee of Pro-Chancellors and Vice-Chancellors and others. As we're doing this, the same Minister of Labour again, rather, we're resolving the problem. And it's still ongoing. Even the President intervening ran to court. And the question I will ask before I will stop, if the court forced the lecturers to go to work tomorrow, what type of teaching will they do? That's the question. If you court forced Nigerian academics, say go and teach against your will. Just like the court forcing a doctor to go and treat a patient against your will. How many of us will go and meet that doctor? That's the question I will ask Nigeria. Thank you.
Meanwhile, the president says the country is fully committed to ensuring quality education, particularly an expansion in digital learning compliant with national and international standards. President Muhammadu Buhari, represented by the Minister of Education, Adamu Adamu, made the pledge while making a statement on digital transformation of education at a summit on the sidelines of the 77th session of the UN General Assembly in New York. He gave the assurance that with continued partnership and significant capital investments, both in education and other relevant sectors, transformation in the sector is sustainable. According to the president, Nigeria is restoring trust between communities as his administration continues to provide safe learning environments and responsive services, especially for the most vulnerable. Now, in other stories, the International Labour Organization is urging the state and federal governments to urgently address growing poverty, illiteracy, and other key drivers of child labor in the country. The country director of the ILO, Mrs. Vanessa Fala, made the appeal at a conference to mark the 2022 World Day Against Child Labor in Abuja. According to the ILO chief, Nigeria currently records an estimated 15 million children engaged in child labor, with more than half of this number working in hazardous environments. Officials of the Federal Ministry of Labor and Employment and the International Labour Organization are attending this conference at the banquet hall of the Presidential Villa to discuss strategies to end child labor. The United Nations defines child labor as the exploitation of children through any form of work that deprives them of their childhood and interferes with their ability to attend regular schools. A recent report by the ILO and UNICEF reveals that an estimated 1.5 million children globally are engaged in child labor. About 15 million of this figure are in Nigeria, with over 7 million children working in hazardous environments. The report also shows an increase of 8.9 million between 2016 and 2020. The ILO is appealing to the government at all levels to urgently address key drivers of child labor by pursuing and enforcing policies that criminalize the act.
Let us be reminded that the right to education is a human right and that providing children with universal access to free, compulsory quality basic education is important to ensure that human beings reach their full potential. The eradication of working during school hours and a passage of the Labor Law Bill criminalizing the list of hazardous child labor be implemented.
However, the Minister of Labour and Employment says the federal government is committed to eradicating child labor in the country.
The Nigerian government tried to put into place so many measures, like I said before, towards uplifting or enhancing social protection. Because it's all agreed by all that social protection is one of the ways to fight poverty. It's also agreed that poverty fuels people to resort to child labor situation for more income.
The Child Rights Act 2003 guarantees the fundamental human rights of children, including the right to education, but only 24 out of the 36 states of the Federation have domesticated the act. Well, to legal matters now, the Federal High Court in Abuja has fixed October 4 for hearing in a suit challenging the decision of the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, to end the continuous voters registration on July the 31st. The presiding judge, Justice Inyang Ekwo, fixed the date after 4 Nigerians filed a suit seeking to be joined as a party in the case. They had sought an injunctive order compelling the electoral umpire to extend the CVR to November the 27th, which they argued is the end of the 90-day period for registration of voters before the 2023 general elections. Counsel to the plaintiff, Mr. Richard Ebie, representing Senior Advocate of Nigeria, Mr. Michael Ozekome, argues that INEC contravened the provisions of the Electoral Act by stopping the exercise.
INEC lawyer asked the court to give us a fresh day so that both matters can be taken together so that the court can give a consolidated judgment on the two matters. And that is why the matter could not proceed to hearing today. So by the next adjourned day, which is the 4th of October 2022, we shall be taking up the issue before the court. But our case is clear. We are saying by the provisions of the law, INEC has a duty to continue registration of voters. Section 10 says continuously. And one of the justifications that INEC is using for stopping the registration of voters is that they opened the window for registration for more than a year. That they have done more than enough favor to the people by opening the window of registration for more than a year. But for Christ's sake, that is not what the law says. The law says continuous. The only exception to that provision is 90 days to the election. That is when registration can stop. Anything outside that, the INEC is obliged to continue the registration ad infinitum, except 90 days to the election. And that is why we are contesting these issues in court. And we want the court to make a final pronouncement on this issue.
Staying with the judiciary, the Federal High Court in Abuja has fixed December the 5th for a ruling on an application filed by the alleged kidney donor for the daughter of former Deputy Senate President, Senator Ike Ekweremadu, Mr. David Ukpo. Mr. Ukpo is asking the courts to set aside its orders made on July the 1st and 6th, giving Senator Ekweremadu and his wife, Beatrice, access to his biodata. Justice Inyang Ekwo fixed the date after the counsel for parties in the suit adopted their processes and presented their arguments. Counsel to Mr. Ukpo, Mr. Bamidele Igbenidion, argued that granting the request of the federal lawmaker amounts to violating his client's fundamental rights to privacy as guaranteed by Section 37 of the 1999 Constitution. Well, still News at 10, House of Representatives, Investment and Securities Act 2007. That's on business news. Please stay with us.
Welcome back. The International Monetary Fund has revised Nigeria's growth outlook for 2022 and 2023 from 2.7% to 3.4% and 2.6% to 3.2% respectively. Well, this formed part of a report presented by IMF's representative in Nigeria at the quarterly meeting of the Financial Market Dealers Association in Lagos, hosted by First Bank. The IMF representative, however, projected a rise in Nigeria's inflation rate.
IMF country representative for a very
Treasurers of banks and members of the Financial Market Dealers Association of Nigeria are meeting here for the first time since December 2019 due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Over the years, the quarterly meeting has served as a rallying point for knowledge sharing and dissemination, as well as fostering business relationships among members. First Bank of Nigeria is hosting this first quarterly meeting since the resumption.
The role of the treasurer has become more sophisticated and more strategic to every bank now as compared to my day.
I was going to say that was the question.
International Monetary Fund representative in Nigeria is the guest. She dissects the topic, Nigeria macroeconomic developments and outlook, IMF view, with suggestions on how to navigate the nation's economic challenges.
It's important to combat structurally high inflation, but also to put inflation as the primary objective of the central bank. The central bank today has many objectives, and it complicates monetary policy a little bit if you are trying to achieve too much. We understand, of course, particularly during the crisis, that the central bank tried to support the economy, and it should have supported, but it's also time to start to scale back some of the support and focus more on the inflation, which is increasing.
The remaining takeaways from this meeting, which members promise to work on.
We have a lot of engagement with the central bank, and we also have engagement with other key stakeholders. You know, our own job is to make sure that at least we come up with ideas.
We expect, for example, the Lagos Rail to start, and we are part of that financing actually. So that's one of those things. The Lekki Port that we're there, I think next year should be up. We are part of that Lekki Port financing, and the infrastructure you are seeing that Lekki Port area you're going to see. Dangote Refinery will be coming up. We are part of that Dangote Refinery financing.
The association is promising to be unrelentless in its engagement with Nigerian monetary authorities to build ethical conduct and grow sound markets that compete favorably anywhere in the world.
And for more business stories on the news at 10, here's Teniola Oyetayo.
Banking so easy, so simple. Dial *894# now to experience it. You first, First Bank.
Thanks a lot, Kaide. Welcome to Business News. The House of Representatives has proposed a bill to repeal the existing Investment and Security Act 2007 and enact another to establish the Securities and Exchange Commission as the apex regulatory authority for the Nigerian capital market. Speaking at the submission in Abuja, the Speaker of the House of Representatives, Mr. Femi Gbajabiamila, says the capital market allows for wealth creation, and so a proper and efficient operation is essential to sustainable economic growth. On his part, the chairman of the House Committee on Capital Markets and Institutions, Babangida Ibrahim, said the bill will establish a new market infrastructure and wide-ranging system of regulation. Nigeria's surge in inflation is directly connected to the foreign exchange management policy. Well, this is the perspective of the Chief Executive Officer of Center for Promotion of Private Enterprises, Dr. Muda Yusuf. Dr. Yusuf, who was a guest on our Business Morning program earlier today, insists that a more sustainable foreign exchange policy is needed.
If the situation was just about inflation rate of 20.5%,
could have been tolerable. But the reality is much worse than that. In many cases, in many instances, prices have doubled, prices have risen by over 50%, in some cases even 200%. So the foreign exchange situation, of course, is a major one. Two components of it. There's the depreciation, which we all know about, particularly in the parallel market. Unfortunately, we have a situation where the parallel market is now becoming the major reference market. A good market will match demand with supply. It will match those who are buying with those who are selling. What we have is an allocation platform. And that is creating a whole lot of distortions and a whole lot of corruption as well. A lot of inflows are not coming in. Because this economy typically does not depend only on oil. We have other sources. Because it's a very big economy. Even with all the challenges that we have, there are still a lot of opportunities that can attract inflow.
The equities market records its first positive close this week amid negative market sentiment. Will Ibong tells us more. Welcome to the Stock Market Report. Finally, some fairly good news at the NGX as it records its first positive close after 7 trading sessions. The all-share index inched marginally higher by 0.01% from the basement where it's been trading back to the floor. And this is thanks largely to FBN Holdings, which was up by 5%, adding 50 kobo to its share price to close at 10 naira 50 kobo. RT Briscoe also made significant gains today, followed by Linkage Assurance. Meanwhile, Total Energies had the thinnest slice of the bread today. It fell by almost 10% to close at 211 naira 10 kobo from its opening price of 234 naira 50 kobo. Activity appears to be picking up somewhat, but with lower number of deals. It's still a bit of a Humpty Dumpty bus ride at the NGX, and investors sure are wary of getting burned. And that's the Stock Market Report. I'm Will Ibong. Back to you. Thanks a lot, Will. Now let's check out the closing numbers for other major equities around the world. And that's Business News tonight. I'm Teniola Oyetayo. It's back to Kayode for the rest of the news at 10.
Banking, so easy, so simple. Dial *894# now to experience it. You first, First Bank.
Well, thank you, Teniola. Former Chief of Defense Staff General Martin Luther Agwai is asking Nigerians to vote for competent persons who can turn the fortunes of the nation around instead of voting along ethnic and religious lines. General Agwai says the development and security of Nigeria is dependent on the election of competent persons with a pedigree to solve the nation's problems. He was speaking in Abuja at a conference on national unity organized by the Alumni Association of the National Institute of Policy and Strategic Studies.
Issues of national unity dominate discussions at the annual conference of the Alumni Association of the National Institute of Policy and Strategic Studies. The national president of the association sets the tone for the conference as he identifies some of the challenges bedeviling Nigeria.
Indeed, we have had our own share of political, economic, and social crises occasioned by poor planning, inadequate management, lack of accountability, poor citizen participation, and in particular, non-implementation of a robust policy framework and strategies to drive the critical sector of the economy.
On the part of the chairman of the ANI Heritage Council and the Sultan of Sokoto, The need for continuous dialogue is key, while the Minister of Information appeals to Nigerians to be temperate in order to avoid a Holocaust.
We have had series of talk shows like this across the country in the last 2, 3, 4 years. And we're still having more, all towards bringing stability, sanity, understanding, love, respect amongst all of us as Nigerians.
I appeal to Nigerians for us to lower the temperature. We are bound to disagree, but we must recognize the fact that our strength lies in our unity.
With the security challenges being experienced in the country, the keynote speaker and former Chief of Defense Staff harps on the need for Nigerians to solve their problems by electing competent persons.
It is these challenges that we have that have brought Boko Haram, have brought banditry, have brought issue agitation for this, breaking away, and as the Sultan have said, this is what we need. We shouldn't be tired of talking. Dialogue. We should talk to each other.
The keynote speaker makes some recommendations aimed at solving some of the challenges.
One of the first recommendations I made is that if people want a country to be reviewed or constitution or anything, is it possible in the next dispensation we look into it so that everybody will feel comfortable and we move forward as one country under God. Secondly, I have recommended that another vexed question is that of settler indigent.
Worried by the apparent divisive tendencies in the country, the Alumni Association of the National Institute for Policy and Strategic Studies hosted the one-day high-level conference to discuss Nigeria's national unity ahead of the 2023 general elections.
Well, back to education. With the targets to enroll over 100,000 out-of-school children into schools, the Adamawa state government says it has succeeded in reaching 52,000 of them in spite of the many challenges faced. Through the establishment of basic learning centers and conventional primary schools, the State Universal Basic Education Board, in collaboration with Better Education Service Delivery Authority, is seeing an increase in school enrollment in the state. But with the call by stakeholders for the sustenance of the program, the state government is now faced with the challenge of paucity of funds.
At the beginning of the year, Governor Umaru Fintiri of Adamawa State launched the 2022 enrollment of out-of-school children into non-formal learning centers, targeting about 100,000 children across the state. The effort, which was a collaboration with BESTA program of the federal government, resulted in a significant drop in the number of out-of-school children in the state. With the BESTA program about winding down in the state, critical stakeholders drawn from traditional leaders, local government educational secretaries, state lawmakers, and officials of the Adamawa State Ministry of Education and the State Basic Education Board are gathered here to brainstorm on the sustainability of the initiative by the state government.
We have trained their teachers.
In his remarks, the state coordinator of BESTA, who is the provost of the Federal College of Education, Yola, Dr. Muhammad Degereji, gives insights into the progress recorded so far.
We have trained their teachers across 911 learning centers across the 21 local government areas. We bought materials for them, and now they are teaching our children. As intervention this time, we are feeding them. We have provided uniforms for them, learning materials, blackboards where necessary, mats for the sangayas, and allowances for the alarammas.
Some participants say the program has achieved its purpose, but call for its sustainability.
They have focused the areas that they are not in formal education, in the sense that some of the areas have difficulties to reach areas and sensitize them to enroll their children in schools.
The Adamawa State Commissioner for Education and Capital Development, Mrs. Wilbina Jackson, assures them all that the state will build on the successes so far recorded
The plans are that we are bringing in more number of students or children or whatever you want to use the name. We are bringing more of them. We are encouraging them more, giving them everything that they needed, be it uniform or whatever. We are doing it with the base that's something, and it will continue better than it ever started.
So far, owing to paucity of funds, the Adamawa State government has enrolled 52,000 children in 2021 out of the over 100,000 it plans to enroll. The objective of BESDA is to reduce the number of out-of-school children and improve literacy at the early grade level of primary education.
On the foreign scene, nearly 2 weeks after the death of Queen Elizabeth II, the United Kingdom's longest reigning monarch, the nation's official period of mourning has come to an end. Well, Simon Pusey has more on this and other international news in Around the World in 5.
Good evening and welcome to the Channel studios here in London with your international news around the world in 5. Flags on British government buildings around the world are flying at full mast once again as the period of national mourning following the death of Queen Elizabeth II draws to a close.
Most high, most mighty.
The Queen was buried in a private ceremony in Windsor on Monday evening following a state funeral in London and military procession to Windsor Castle. But the royal family will continue to observe another week of mourning, and flags at royal residences will remain at half-mast until the 27th of September, the day after their mourning period ends. Buckingham Palace has said royal household staff, representatives of the household on official duties and troops committed to ceremonial duties will also observe the extended mourning period. The Russian separatist head of the Kherson region of Ukraine says they have decided to hold a referendum on joining Russia and have urged the Kremlin to give its permission as soon as possible. In a post, Vladimir Saldo, the Russian-appointed head of Kherson, said he hoped Kherson would become a part of Russia, a fully-fledged subject of a united country. Russian forces control around 95% of Ukraine's Kherson territory in the south of the country. A US judge has quashed a Baltimore man's murder conviction in a case that spawned the hit true crime podcast Serial. Adnan Syed was met with cheers from his supporters as he left the court. He was 19 when he was sentenced to life in prison for the death of his ex-girlfriend, Hae Min Lee, whose body was found buried in the woods in 1999. Prosecutors last week asked the court to throw out his conviction, saying a year-long case review had turned up 2 alternative suspects. Syed will be released into home detention after nearly 23 years behind bars.
Through our review, our reinvestigation revealed that the original prosecutors and the subsequent prosecutors in the Attorney General's office failed to disclose relevant information about alternative suspects, one of whom threatened to kill the victim and had motive to kill the victim, and both of whom had a pattern of violence against women.
A powerful earthquake has struck western Mexico, killing at least 1 person, damaging buildings and knocking out power. 1 person was killed in the Pacific port of Manzanillo when a department store roof collapsed on them. Authorities also reported damage to several hospitals in the western state of Michoacan near the epicenter, which was in a sparsely populated part of Mexico. The quake was relatively shallow at only 15 kilometers deep, which would have amplified its impact. Palestinian gunmen have clashed with Palestinian Authority security forces in the occupied West Bank, and 1 man was killed in the confrontations, which broke out after the arrest of 2 militants. Islamist armed group Hamas, rival of the Western-backed Palestinian Authority, said the PA had arrested one of its senior members wanted by Israel and another gunman in the city of Nablus. There was no immediate comment from the PA, which has come under criticism from Israel and the United States for not doing enough to rein in gunmen in militant strongholds such as Nablus and the nearby city of Jenin. Local authorities say at least 14 sperm whale carcasses have been found along a beach of southeastern Australia's King Island. According to a spokesperson for Australia's Department of Natural Resources and Environment, the whale carcasses were all young males and were already dead when they were first reported. Experts have been dispatched to the island to investigate the stranding. Authorities are currently looking into how to remove the bodies, but they may be left to decompose naturally, as the surrounding environment may hamper access to tow the carcasses away. And finally, spectators defied the rain and cold in Munich to watch the traditional Oktoberfest parade. Brass bands and drummers in vibrantly coloured outfits played upbeat Oompa music as part of the parade, which is always held on the second day of the world's largest beer festival. Bavarian Premier Markus Söder, who watched the parade from a stand, had campaigned strongly for the festival to happen after a 2-year break due to the coronavirus pandemic. The 187th edition of Oktoberfest ends on October the 6th. And that's your international news around the world in 5. Now back to the Channel studios in Lagos.
Thank you, Simon, and welcome to Sports News. Toby Amusan's 100 meters hurdles world record set at the World Athletics Championships in July has been ratified by World Athletics. Amusan ran 12.12 seconds in the semi-finals in Oregon to break the world record of 12.20 seconds that had been set by American Kendra Harrison in London in 2016. Now, the 25-year-old was not done there, as she followed that remarkable performance with a wind-assisted 12.06 to win the final. Here, our incredible times were questioned, or her incredible times were questioned by commentators and fans alike, but all the doubts have now been laid to rest with this ratification by World Athletics. Now, the Super Eagles of Nigeria earlier today began preparations for next week's international friendly against Algeria in Oran. 21 players were involved in today's training session in Constantine, but 21 players are now in camp. Both former African champions will face off at the Stade Olympique in Oran on Tuesday, September the 27th. Nigeria and Algeria have met 8 times in international competitions, with Nigeria winning 5 of the matches. Now, former Ukraine captain and coach Andriy Shevchenko have presented Poland skipper Robert Lewandowski with a special Ukraine armband in Warsaw earlier today. Barcelona striker Lewandowski has been a vocal supporter of Ukraine following Russia's military invasion of the country and has previously worn a similar armband while playing for Bayern Munich last season. Shevchenko thanked Lewandowski for his support, saying how important it will be to see the Polish captain wearing the armband when he takes the field in Poland's opening World Cup match against Mexico in Qatar on November the 22nd. Now, that's a wrap on Sports News. Thank you for watching. I'm Victor Matthias. It's back to Kaede.
Well, thank you, Victor. And the main news again. Former President Goodluck Jonathan today warned of threats to democracy, saying there must be a nation before there are elections. He stated this at a one-day conference by the Goodluck Jonathan Foundation in Abuja, where other speakers also urged politicians to pursue peaceful and violence-free elections in 2023. And that's the news at 10 for tonight, everyone. Thank you for watching. I'm Kaede Okikulu. To have a beautiful night.